Thank you, everyone, for joining the Mid-South Atlantic Small Business Transportation Resource Center 2022 Atlanta Bonding Education Program. This session, Module 7, is the DBE Contract Compliance, Davis-Bacon Certified Payroll. We will be joined by Ms. Shona, Dismuke, Contract Compliance Manager, City of Atlanta, and Ms. Megan Payne, Senior Manager Certification with the City of Atlanta. Okay, let's see. Our agenda here is a welcome. My boss, Mr. Joe Jackson, is at a conference, so he's not on there, so he could not get a good reception. And we have our roll call, in which I will do. City of Atlanta Certification will present first. Then the Contract and Compliance, Davis-Bacon will be next. Question and answer with the homework assignment and a closing. And the information for all our participants. Not two more people in. Is the 10-hour sessions. I'm on webinar. Attend, complete our homework assignments, and Ms. Megan Payne is the certification manager who works with interim director Bruce T. Bell in the City of Atlanta Office of Contract Compliance. Megan is mostly tasked with overseeing the administration of the certification process for the city's two business opportunity programs. The Equal Business Opportunity, or EBO program, offers certification for certain minority-owned businesses, as well as female-owned businesses. The Small Business Opportunity, or SBO program, certifies businesses based on many factors, including applicants meeting the size standard as established by the United States Small Business Administration. Megan's a proud native Atlantan who was educated in the Atlanta public school system, as well as the University System of Georgia. She is inspired by the business owners she encounters who strive for success in our fertile Atlanta marketplace. When not advocating for the small business community, you may find me working on a number of home improvement projects or patronizing Atlanta's most independently owned shops and restaurants. Okay, I can move this around. Proceed.
Thank you for the warm introduction. The first thing I want to clear up is Bruce Bell is not our interim director anymore. He is permanent. So
okay.
We are. So I don't want to hear about it tomorrow in the office. So I want to clear that up right now. Okay, so this is my contact information. The Mayor's Office of Contract Compliance is at 68 Mitchell Street on the Tower side in Suite 5100. My landline is 404-330-6992. And I'll also give you my email address later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so my part of the presentation is on how to apply for EBO and or SBO certification. Next slide. And let's start with our policy statement. Next slide, please. So it is the policy of the City of Atlanta, or the city, to actively promote full and equal opportunity for everyone doing business with the City of Atlanta. The City of Atlanta Mayor's Office of Contract Compliance is responsible for administering the city's various diversity programs, the Equal Business Opportunity Program, or EBO, the Small Business Opportunity Program, SBO, as well as the SBO Sheltered Market. And we also administer the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program for ACDBE and DBE. Next slide, please. So the Equal Business Opportunity, or EBO program, originated under the great Mayor Maynard H. Jackson, starting in 1974. The program is race and gender conscious. The certifications that we offer are under African American Business Enterprise, Asian Pacific Islander Business Enterprise, Hispanic American Business Enterprise, Native American, as well as female. The main thing that we look for is that the owners are US citizens, as well as there is 51% ownership, management, and control by either a minority or female person or group of persons in that one category. So it could be one individual who is African American, or it could be a group of African Americans that constitute 51% or greater interest in the company. Next slide, please. So our Small Business Opportunity, or SBO program, is race and gender neutral. Certification is based on the same criteria as the EBO program, but in addition to the EBO program requirements, we also evaluate the last 3 years of average gross receipts and compare the average to the SBA size standard or revenue size. And that's based on NAICS codes. And the certification type under the SBO program is the Small Business Enterprise, or SBE certification. Next slide. All right, the process. What do you have to do to be able to apply for certification? Next slide. So I mentioned that the programs are for US citizens. We do require that each applicant business owner, meaning that if there's one owner that owns 100% of the business, one owner that owns 51%, and another that owns 49%, or what have you, every single owner of the applicant business must provide proof of US citizenship, if applicable, race and gender as well. We ask for a government issued photo ID, a local business office lease, and that could be a traditional office, or it could be a home-based business. So in the case of a home-based business, we would require either a property statement, a copy of your deed, or a mortgage statement. We also require that every applicant provide a business license for their local office, and this license is issued by the city or county. It may also be under a name such as occupational license or occupational tax, but it is not the state registration. It is a local tax license. The next thing that we require for all applicants is a copy of your bank signature card. In lieu of the bank signature card, because I understand that a lot of banks do not release those anymore, you can provide a letter on bank letterhead listing who the authorized signers are on your business account. We also ask for resumes for each owner and or principal of the company. The company capability statement. This is something that a lot of people don't know what it is. So I tell people that it's like a bio for your company. So it might list projects that you'd like to highlight. It might list the NAICS codes in which your business operates, or any other credentials or accreditations that your business or business owners might have. We also require federal tax returns for the last 3 years. There are some cases in which we will accept personal tax returns, and that is if a business has not been in existence for 3 years. So either a new business, a newly formed business, could provide personal federal tax returns to meet this requirement, or a combination. But it all depends on when the business was started and whether or not the business should have filed first federal income tax returns for the business. One thing that we also vet each applicant for is the commercially useful function, or CUF, C-U-F. So we require that the applicant select up to 4 NAICS codes, and we're looking for the 6-digit NAICS codes. And then, of course, there are other documents that are needed based upon the business structure and also based upon the NAICS codes that are requested. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first step in applying for certification is to apply for the City of Atlanta iSupplier number. The reason why we make this a requirement is because we want to make sure that each applicant for certification also is registered as a vendor with the City of Atlanta, so that you will receive the notifications for upcoming projects that you may be interested in. The Department of Procurement administers the supplier or vendor registration process. And what you can do is go to our website at www.atlantaga.gov, and then you would select business and then suppliers. And when you reach the Supplier Central page, there are options for taking virtual training seminars and registering for the iSupplier number in and of itself. Thank you. Next slide. All right, and once you have secured your iSupplier number, please head to our online portal address. This is something that we are very proud that we have launched. It was official as of May the 1st of this year that we only accept applications that are submitted through our online application portal. You can reach the portal at https://atlantagA.gov2g.com. And once you're there, what you want to do is apply for. Can you point to apply for on the screen? Thank you. Apply for or renew certification. For new applicants that have not been certified in the last year or two, more than likely, your record won't be in our new system because we were using another system prior to last year. So what you would need to do is register for credentials. And you can do that by clicking the apply or renew certification button. And then once you do that, it takes you to the next screen. Thank you. And then you would either look up your account or create your account. And I also like to mention that our service provider offers training. If you look under need help, you can sign up for a training class that will show you step-by-step instructions on how to complete the online application. All right, next slide. Okay, so the things that you want to do when you go to our online portal is create the username and password, and then you want to assemble these supporting documents. Most of the documents that are required for all applicants that I already talked about would be required for you, as well as additional documents based on the structure. So for a sole proprietor, there would be fewer documents because you don't have to register your business with the state than if it were a corporation or an LLC or limited liability company. So you want to assemble all of these supporting documents, and then you want to download the affidavit of certification, which is in the application itself. And then you would take that form to a notary public. We still require that you have the application notarized. And then once it is properly notarized, you upload it as a PDF into our online application portal. Once we review your application, if there are any missing documents or unanswered questions, we will return the application or we will send a Q&A or email to you. So there are a couple different options for us to contact you. And basically, we won't accept your application until it's complete, because at the time that we have a complete application, then the clock starts ticking for us, and that is 60 days, calendar days. Time we usually render a recommendation to our director, and then the director makes the final decision. Okay, and there's a screenshot that shows some of the training classes. See, it's a little small, but there are several offerings for certification application training. Usually there are maybe 2 or 3 training classes per week. And there's also a video library. Once you register for credentials, you have access to that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so while we don't guarantee that every applicant will be certified, it's very likely that your business will be successful. So once you are certified, we want to point out some things that might help you increase your chances of obtaining opportunities with the City of Atlanta, maybe not directly, but definitely as a subcontractor. So you want to attend pre-bid and pre-proposal conferences, attend outreach sessions, monitor the Office of Contract Compliance and the Department of Procurement websites for business opportunities. And definitely you want to apply for DBE or Disadvantaged Business Enterprise certification with either GDOT or MARTA. And there's a link for GDOT's online application portal. You also want to participate in local business development programs, such as the program that you're in now. Identify a mentor, become a member of a local trade and or business organization, ensure bonding and insurance are in place, and contact other local diversity programs for procurement opportunities. Next slide, please. Okay, at this time, I would love to answer any questions you may have. I think there's something in the chat.
Yes,
Okay.
the ladies, Miss Latasha Johnson said, hi. Hey,
Hi.
Megan. It's great to
Hello.
a name with a face. You assisted us with certification. Now we look forward to seeing it benefit our company.
Good thing. Congratulations.
Any other questions? Okay, we will proceed.
All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Miss Shona Dismuke will be speaking next, and her bio is, over the past 15 years, Shona has worked with the City of Atlanta as a senior financial marketing management analyst with the Mayor's Office of Human Services, the Department of Finance's Office of Grants Management, and the Department of Grants and Community Development. In this capacity, Shona provided Davis-Bacon labor standards and Section 3 and MBE/MWBE and URA subject matter knowledge, guidance, and certifications in the form of technical assistance, informational training sessions, pre-bid and pre-construction conferences to internal/external city stakeholders, implementation departments, currently funded subrecipients, and community partners or entities interested in proposal application submissions. In addition, technical assistance was provided to prime contractors/subcontractors and their administrative management staff responsible for certified payrolls, Section 3 and URA relocation assistance and contracting reporting, all in accordance with local, state, HUD, and federal regulations, policies, and procedures. Most recently, Shona has expanded her career tenure with the city as a contract compliance manager with the Mayor's Office of Contract Compliance. In this capacity, Shona serves as part of the aviation silo team, which provides administrative oversight and contract compliance monitoring of the city's Department of Aviation construction and rehabilitation related projects that are disadvantaged business enterprise, DBE, and Davis-Bacon labor standard goal applicable. Shona is best described as a community invested, passionate, impactful, goal-oriented, and results-driven team contributor that individually or collaboratively seeks to minimize barriers and advocate for increased diversity outreach and participation opportunities for MBE, MFBE, DBE, and SBE contractors and subcontractors in partnership with the city and the Mayor's Office of Contract Compliance. Here's Miss Shona.
Well, that's a lot, huh? Well, thank you guys and good evening. And thank you for inviting me this evening to talk about DBE contract compliance and Davis-Bacon certified payrolls. It's my understanding, I did a little homework prior to doing my research and preparing tonight's slide to try to get a feel of what would be the expectation of the class. And it is my understanding that the class is more interested in learning pretty much what it takes to increase your capacity in working on DBE projects or becoming certified or becoming bonded to be able to qualify or meet the requirements for qualification to work on these types of projects. And so I thought about what better way than to understand that than to have our office or look at it from the perspective of how our office, the Office of Contract Compliance, monitors for compliance or what we would expect from contractors or subcontractors that do work on our DBE projects. So in looking at that, you have to look at, I'm pretty sure that everyone or that's on this training are going to look at this training from one or two perspectives. One, you're either going to look at it from a perspective of having been a prime contractor on a project before, or as a subcontractor looking to become a prime on a particular project. From a prime contractor's perspective, the information that I'm going to present will be presented from the expectation that the prime assumes full responsibility of everything that we're talking about. That means if you are the prime, if you're working with subs on your project, then information or submissions come from the sub to you and then you to our office. So there would never be, or in an instance where it would be that the middleman communication is kind of non-existent in these instances. So most subs would submit to the prime would submit to our particular office. If we're speaking or you're receiving the information from the perspective of a subcontractor, this information is helpful for you because it will help you to have a better understanding of why the prime is asking you for a lot of information, why they're asking you to redo your payroll submissions, or why they're asking you for certain reports or certain demographic or certain information that is necessary in order for them to remain compliant on a lot of our DBE contract compliance. So just keep that in mind as we go through the information. And hopefully it'll help you if you are trying to increase your capacity for opportunities and participation, that you'll understand why bonding is so important, why the certification is important, because the responsibility and the overall accountability is so great that without those things, you know, your capacity to be able to carry a project at this level may be decreased. So we're just going to help you through our TA tonight to try to, you know, answer any questions that you may have that have been lingering on as to, I've done all that, you know, has been required. What more can I do? Next slide. So the objective of tonight's training, we're going to talk about DBE objectives. What are the objectives of the city's DBE program? We're going to talk about what all is a part of monitoring DBE contract compliance. This is going to speak about our commercially useful function, prompt payment, EEO affirmative action, DBE goal attainment, per expenditures, wage rate, certified payrolls, site visits. And then we're going to do an overview of the Davis-Bacon Act and federal labor standards requirements. So that's the overall objective of this particular portion of tonight's training. These slides were created specifically for this group, but you know, definitely can be used, and I don't know if it'll be shared, but definitely can be used in your future reference. Next slide. So let's talk about the purpose of the DBE program and its objectives. The first is to ensure non-discrimination in the award and the administration of DOT contracts. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. In the award and administration of DOT assisted contracts in the department's highway, transit, and airport financial assistance programs. Another objective is to create a level playing field on which DBEs can compete fairly for DOT assisted contracts. Another objective is to ensure that the department's DBE program is narrowly tailored in accordance with applicable law. A lot of what we talk about, everything is backed and governed according to laws. Next, to ensure that only firms that fully meet this part's eligibility standards are permitted to participate as DBEs. So this again keeps the playing field level. If everyone's requirements are the same to be certified, to meet certain requirements, no exception, then no one entity over the other would be perceived in a more favorable way than the other. All standards are held and every entity is held according to that. Can you go back? Thank you. The DBE program, an objective is to help remove barriers to participation of DBEs in DOT assistant contracts. That's the purpose of our efforts like tonight, where we do outreach, where we do technical assistance trainings, where we provide information and education upon request, and then sometimes just, you know, in general. But we want to make sure, and most often where we do know that lack of information, lack of knowledge, lack of training sometimes hinder typically qualified entities from participating or seeking out the opportunities because they're just not fully aware or don't have the full understanding. So part of our efforts in providing outreach and training and technical assistance is to help remove those types of barriers. Another objective is to promote the use of DBEs in all types of federally assisted contracts and procurement activities conducted by recipients. So the federal provisions and the laws require that a lot of these federal dollars seek to provide opportunity or increase opportunity and participation to certain groups, certain targeted groups. We just want to make sure through our programs that if the dollars that are used, the federal dollars that are used to assist these projects, we just want to make sure that we are ensuring that those provisions are adhered to accordingly. Another objective is to assist in the development of firms that can compete successfully in the marketplace outside of the DBE program. So yes, the DBE programs through the federal provisions creates the opportunity and the access. However, all of the experience, the knowledge, the standard of processes that you will learn being a part of the DBE program, we would hope that you would then take that and then be able to compete in other programs outside of DBE on your own merit, on your own standards, and success, having been a part of DBE programs previously, that you would take that and be able to be successful in many other programs without or necessarily having that designation. The designation is great for access, initially, but that you shouldn't want to stop there. You should always want to seek and increase your opportunity to participate in programs outside of DBE. And finally, an objective is to provide appropriate flexibility to recipients of federal financial assistance in establishing and providing opportunities for DBEs. Next slide. So once a particular project is established, DBE goal setting comes in. Before any state or local agency can solicit a federally funded project, they must determine if a DBE goal can be set for the project. This is where we take a look at some of the real key factors that are under review and that we pay very close attention to on particular projects in establishing a DBE goal, is to look at what is the anticipated project value? Like, how much is this project going to be awarded? How much money is in this project? Secondly, we're going to look at the scope of work. How much work is involved? What types of trades and skills are going to be necessary to complete this particular project? And based on the need for particular trades and skills, what is the availability of certified firms that we have at our disposal or in our systems that are certified, that can meet and serve as heads, prime, subs on these particular projects? All of these things are taken into consideration when DBE goals are established as part of particular projects. If it is deemed that a goal can be set, then the agency or our department will include that goal in all solicitation documents, along with all of the very specific requirements and criteria for the DBE. Next slide. Once the project is set, the goals have been set on the project, and the award has been made, and all of the participating firms and contractors and subs have been selected, then we are, or our office is responsible for continuous monitoring, or as we call, contract administration and oversight and compliance monitoring. I'm going to discuss in the next few slides certain particular areas that we look for and how we monitor a DBE project or the DBE goal that is assigned to particular projects. The very first one is that these projects we look for and monitor to ensure that it continues to be or serves a commercially useful function. A DBE performs a commercially useful function when it's responsible for the execution of work on the contract and is carrying out its responsibility by actually doing the work, managing it, and supervising all of the work that's involved on a particular project. To be commercially useful, to serve a commercially useful function, the DBE must also be responsible in regards to the materials and the supplies of the contract. You got to be responsible for, negotiating the price on it, determining the quality and the quantity of the materials that you're going to use on the project, when you're ordering it and when you are installing it, and being able to pay for it. So basically, whatever the project requires, that you as a DBE would be able to carry out and meet all of those requirements to make sure that it gets done and that it gets complete. Okay, the second, next slide. Another area that we monitor as part of a DBE goal on a project is prompt payment. So the Prompt Payment Act requires that contractors, subcontractors be paid within a certain period of time. This particular act, this particular clause, or the act or the requirements of the Prompt Payment Act must be included in all of the contract clauses, either between the agency and the prime, and then from the prime to the subs. Now, I can't stress this enough. If you are a subcontractor working on a project, you want to make sure you're paying attention to the language that is established and set out as far as what you will be required to do on working on a DBE project. You want to make sure that as far as the prompt payment, that you realize and know that there is an expectation that you be paid within a certain period of time. Now, the act itself, the law itself requires that payments be made within 30 days. However, local jurisdictions have the right as part of that act to establish their own timeline. Certain entities, MARTA, I think their timeline is like 10 days. But what's important in talking to you from the perspective of the city of Atlanta is that the city of Atlanta's prompt payment clause requires that all primes pay subs within 3 business days of receipt of a payment from the city. So if we pay the prime needs to ensure that its subs are paid within 3 days. If you don't, we're going to talk in another area where we monitor that. We will be able to monitor through the system that Megan mentioned earlier, our SDMS system, where we go in and look and see if payments are made and if subs are paid. That's when we're then on the phone and contacting primes and ensuring, one, that they submit payments that they receive and that they show and can document that they paid their subs. Okay. We'll have plenty of time for questions after. I know that usually gets people attention and they want to speak on that a little more when we discuss it, but we'll have plenty of time at the end to discuss questions. Okay. Next slide. We also monitor for, equal employment opportunity and affirmative action. I don't want to read all of that with all of the the very specific federal regulations that are referenced here. They're here. You'll have an opportunity to read it all in detail. The primary thing that I want to mention about EEO and affirmative action here is that this is another clause that must be included in all sub-recipient or subcontract agreements. Can you go back for me? Skip. This is another clause that has to be included in all sub agreements. You want to look for, if you are a sub and if you're a prime developing contracts, you want to make sure that you include it. The primary goal is that it is our requirement that the contractor will work with the contracting agency and the federal government to ensure that it has made every good faith effort to provide equal opportunity with respect to all of its terms and conditions of employment and in their review of activities under the contract. So we wanted to highlight this is another clause that must be included in all contracts, either between the agency to the prime and then trickle down in all subcontract agreements between the prime and its subcontractors. This is another very important area that we look for while we are monitoring for DBE contract compliance. Next slide. DBE goal attainment. So if we establish, if a particular project has a percentage of goal attainment. The way that we monitor for compliance on that is through where we track progress of payments. Again, the system that was mentioned earlier, our SDMS system, all prime contractors are required to enter payments that were made on behalf of the project to subrecipients. If through the participation goals, a sub, will contribute, 10%, towards the goal, or 20% towards the goal, or whatever the percentage is toward the goal. In that system, we can track through dollar amounts, through the payments that were made, how well a DBE is performing on that particular goal. We monitor this on a daily basis. We are in constant communication with all of our primes. When we notice that the participation may be low or lagging, or may not even be there at all, particularly at certain periods of time in a project. We start as early as a week or two out from the project to start looking for payments being made. And so if participation starts to show that it is not where it need to be per, particular standards, we're on the phone, we're calling, we're in email communication to find out what's happening. We notice and have systems set in place to trigger, red flags for us. And so this helps us in making sure that all of our DBEs are on track to meet their particular goals. We do know and take into account that a lot of things happen, once construction or work begin on a project, like change orders, conditions in the weather, all of those sort of things that we have no control over. We do know that they can affect particular goals. However, what we want to ensure is that the communication of some of these setbacks or these challenges are communicated in a proper manner, and that there is a plan or a cure to rectify that's in place. Okay, next slide. And then our last one we're going to talk about here, which is going to segue into certified payrolls, is most DBE projects. The way that we monitor for them, most DBE projects are, in a sense, particularly anything that requires construction and rehab, things like that. Those projects are going to trigger Davis-Bacon. Okay, and the Davis-Bacon and all of its related acts apply to contractors and subcontractors that are performing on federally funded projects in excess of $2,000. So $2,000 is the trigger. That's a low trigger. So it almost always apply to these types of projects for construction, alteration, or repair of buildings or public works. The Davis-Bacon and its related acts, the contractors are required to pay a prevailing wage. So based on these wages from the Department of Labor, Davis-Bacon applicable projects must pay these workers a standard rate of pay. Is usually, we're going to get into that in more detail when we talk about the certified payrolls, but it is a law. It is a federal law that requires that these wages per the geographic area in which the project is being implemented, that certain wages are paid to all of the workers. And we monitor that through review and submission and review of certified payrolls, as well as labor interviews. We come on site and do site visits where at random we will pull employees that are working on the project to ensure that what you've documented and submitted on the payrolls match what they say. So again, there are consequences when payrolls or Davis-Bacon payrolls or wages are not paid on these projects, which could, hold up your payment, which can result in restitution of payment, going back and back paying all of that time and the wages that were not paid when they should have been, a number of things. But we will get into greater detail and discussion on all of that as we get prepared for the discussion on certified payrolls. Are there any questions on DBE contract compliance to this point?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question. This
Yes,
is
ma'am.
Latasha with Paramount. So the documentation that's required for us to fill out, it's like 16 pages, I believe. Is there someone in office that can assist us with being sure we don't miss anything versus us submitting it and then having it kick back to us? Because this would be a,
Which 16-page documents are you talking about for certification?
no, not for certification. Like if we wanted to potentially bid on a project or
Mhm.
be considered as a subcontractor on a project. I'm gonna pull it up. I'm gonna come
Okay.
back to you because
Okay.
I'm gonna put it up and then I can come back.
And keep in mind, you can definitely reach out, to us, because I may not be real specific about the documents that you're talking about right now. But we'll definitely make ourselves available to provide you any type of assistance and answer questions that you may have that'll help you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Keep in mind, like I said, these are just things that we look for and what are part of our routine. Please keep in mind, as I always tell people, I know people when they talk about compliance and non-compliance and monitoring, that sometimes those terms can be, put out there in terms of intimidation, like, oh, they're trying to get me, or just the efforts are simply to try to make sure that I don't do well, or that, or point out what is not being done right. That is not the point. The point of overall, compliance monitoring is to ensure that, where there may be some red flags, where there may be some inconsistencies, that just lets us know that, there are some challenges that you are facing that we want to ensure that we remove them. We want to remove the challenges. We want to remove the barriers, because when you're working on our projects or any DBE goal or Davis, any project that is applicable for other federal provisions, it is in the best interest of us as partners to make sure that we are working together, because we are a partnership. If you're not meeting the goal, then the city is not meeting the goal. The program is not meeting the goal. So it is absolutely necessary for us to ensure that where you're facing challenges, where you are unsure, where your your knowledge base is not where it needs to be in order to carry out the project successfully, that at least our efforts is to ensure that we get some questions answered for you to try to see where we can get you back on track in a number of these areas. And so that is the purpose of us in making sure that compliance is monitored on all of our projects. So I thank Ms. Barner that this is a good opportunity to go into a little break, because I think in the next slide, if you can go to it, I think the next slide goes into specific talking about, yes, ma'am, talks about Davis-Bacon and certified payrolls. And that's a very important piece, guys. I'm pretty sure as contractors, you've heard about these payrolls. You may have encountered payments being held up because the payrolls were not submitted at all or submitted incorrectly, have errors and omissions that have to be corrected before you can get paid. I'm going to sit and in this next segment and talk to you about why. Okay? You're muted, Ms. Barner.
We'll take a 10 minutes break right now. Come back at 7:04. Okay, everyone? Okay, starting it. Is it time?
Are we back? Did we lose anybody?
No. It
Very
doesn't
good.
look like it.
Very good. Very good. We're gonna go ahead and start.
I want to ask a question. I guess I could wait. We have a person on an iPhone. I want to know who that is for my attendance record today.
Beth, is Tiffany with Bryson
Oh,
Instructors.
okay, that's Tiffany.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you very much. And there's another person on an iPhone. Anyone else? Could you tell me, identify who you are? So that I will not delete you. Okay, we'll let you proceed.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Can you go back a slide, Ms. Barnum? So welcome back. So prior to the break, there was a segue when we talked about monitoring DBE projects, that one of the requirements that we monitor for, one of the areas that we monitor for is centered around Davis-Bacon certified payrolls and site visits. So again, as we're talking to you specifically, the perspective is one or two ways. Now, every contractor working on a DBE project will more than likely have to complete a certified payroll. That is where you identify particular workers, every worker that is working on the project for your company, and what and how you are paying them. The only difference between completing the payroll or your responsibility to the payrolls as a subcontractor or a prime is that all subs submit their payrolls to the prime, and the prime submits the payroll on behalf of the entire project. And when I say that all subs submit their payrolls to the prime, that means at that point it needs to be submitted error-free. Without, any errors, any omissions, definitely making sure there are no underpayments and things like that, and you'll understand why. And again, some of the most, significant consequences with that is that you can hold up the payment for the entire project if payrolls are not in compliance. So the first thing in understanding and talking about why certified payrolls are required, we're going to talk about the Davis-Bacon Act itself and the federal labor standards. The whole purpose of this is to ensure, as we stated before, proper payment of prevailing wages to laborers, okay? The summary of the requirements are this. It requires that wages be paid at least once a week. So, not paying workers for once a month. If you don't have the payroll backing or the dollars to meet payrolls, once a week for particular workers, these are not the type of projects you want to work on, because the federal laws attached to Davis-Bacon applicable projects require that the wages be paid once a week. The law requires that there is premium pay for any overtime. Overtime is going to be anything over 40 hours in a week. The provision provides that there are no unauthorized deductions on these particular payrolls for individuals working on the project. So, you can't penalize workers and saying you're going to hold back, a certain percentage of their pay. If you do that on the payroll forms, you'll see that it requires for you to list what are the deductions you're taking out of that employee's check. And so there are certain deductions that are not permitted when you are making deductions for employees working on these Davis-Bacon applicable projects. It's important to know, because all of that is going to affect your bottom line when you're taking on these particular projects. The Davis-Bacon Act, in a nutshell, again, you're going to hear me talk about it and say it over and over again, requires payment of prevailing wages. These wages are determined by the Department of Labor, not by the contractor, not by the city, not by the Department of Transportation, not by the Department of Aviation. These wages are established by the Federal Department of Labor. The Davis-Bacon Act provides a fair opportunity for contractors to compete in building programs funded by the federal government. Again, it keeps the wages across the board the same for anybody that's bidding on the projects, okay? And it prevents any contractors who are bidding on the projects to not bid below, like you wouldn't be able to minimize your bid by not paying or thinking that you're going to be able to pay minimal salaries or keep your payroll budget area down by not, paying certain salaries. The prevailing wages, you want to make sure you have a copy of the wage determination in hand at the time of the bid so that you're aware of what the wages are in that particular area while you are preparing for bids to work on these types of projects. Next slide. Some of the other laws that are there, we'll briefly go through these. The first one that are federal laws that are applicable to federal labor standards is the Contract Work Hours and Safety Standards Act. This act basically says that workers should not work any more than 40 hours a week unless they get paid overtime. If they work over 40, get paid time and a half. The second thing that this act requires is that projects must comply with certain safety standards. They may require you to wear certain things or make provisions for certain safety requirements for all of the workers on site, but that will be very specific on a project by project basis. The Copeland Anti-Kickback Act, this requires the payment. This is the act that says, wages must be paid once a week. This is in an effort to make sure that you don't have, workers working on projects for a whole month before they get paid and things like that. And that makes it hard to monitor for compliance. The Copeland Anti-Kickback Act also is the act that establishes that only certain permissible payroll deductions are allowed. We can get into specifics about that, at a later time in discussion, but there are certain deductions that you just can't take out in penalizing certain employees for certain things that they're doing on the job. And then the Fair Labor Standards Act, it sets the federal minimum wage and additional overtime requirements. So these are some of the laws that are applicable to Davis-Bacon applicable projects. Next slide. When we're talking about doing certified payrolls, you can't complete a certified payroll without understanding that there is a wage determination or a wage rate sheet or form that is applicable for every project. The wage determination basically is just a list of wage rates and the fringe benefit rates for a specific or each classification of laborers and mechanics that's determined by the Department of Labor to be prevailing in a given area for a particular type of construction. So basically it's the list. It tells you what the classifications are. They list them very specifically. There could be 10 types of laborers. There could be, different classifications of carpenters, plumbers, electricians, all of that. But based on the type of construction, the Department of Labor establishes this list of wage determinations to be used on particular projects. But the agency would have already had that pool and would have included that as part of the bid package. General wage determinations, they reflect the rates that are prevailing in a specific area. So, depending on where the project is, if it's in Fulton County, Clayton County, whatever particular counties, the wage would be specific to that. The wages are based on traditional labor markets at county level. And then the wages and the fringe benefits can vary in detail by labor category. is all based on a case-by-case basis and the type of projects. You can get or enter the information to get wage determinations on a particular project by going online at www.sam.gov. And then there are instructions related to how you go about getting that. They're self-explanatory once you go on the particular site and look for how to obtain a wage determination. Next slide. When we talked about the wage determination and based on the type of work, there are 4 categories in which the wage rates are separated. First type of project is residential. Second one is building. Third one is heavy. And then there's highway. Most of DBE projects are going to be in the area of either heavy or highway. And those particular examples under each of those areas are there for those particular types of construction categories. Next slide. So here's another area or provision that is required to be mentioned or included in contracts that are developed on these particular types of projects. There are 2 contract clauses that must be included in contracts as it relates to certified payrolls. The first one is that the contractor shall submit weekly for any week in which any contract work is performed a copy of a certified payroll. Okay, that the clause or the contract clause basically saying this is a DBE applicable project, certified payrolls must be submitted weekly. The second thing is that each weekly payroll that is submitted, it must be accompanied by a statement of compliance. I'm going to show you an example of the actual payroll form and the page 2, which serves as the statement of compliance for these particular projects. You'll see what they look like and how they should be completed. But as far as the contracts that are developed for most of our DBE projects, from the agency to the prime and the prime to the subs, you want to look for this particular clause that must be included in those contracts as well. Next slide. Again, this in looking at it, weekly payrolls submitted, the information that is on those payrolls, the particular form that we encourage the use of, it is very specific in terms of the information that's required. Now, that particular form is called the Department of Labor Payroll Form WH-347. This is a form is most commonly used. It has all the information that meets compliance standards. However, some larger companies and larger entities utilize payroll software that can generate the same information as this particular form. It just comes out and looks different. You are absolutely allowed to do that as long as it captures all of the necessary and required information. Okay. That particular form, again, as we said, is the WH-347, and that particular link that is listed here in the slide, which will be made available to you upon request, is where you can obtain that particular form. Next slide. Ms. Barnes, next slide. So here's, oh, go ahead. Go back for me. Okay, so here, yes, the second page of the form before we get to the sample is talking about a statement of compliance. A properly signed statement of compliance must be submitted or transmitted to the agency, and that form is the form or the document that actually certifies the information that is on the first page. It is necessary, again, because it certifies it. It certifies 4 things: that the appropriate information is being maintained by the company, Secondly, such information is correct and complete. Third, each laborer or mechanic has been paid for the full weekly wages that were earned. And fourth, each laborer or mechanic has been paid not less than the wage or the applicable wage that was determined on the wage determination. Again, a lot of companies, you know, an error or a hold up in making payments on a project is because a lot of projects only submit the first page. The statement of compliance is necessary, mandated, and is and required because whoever completes it will be what we call a certifying official. They're certifying all the information that is there, and they will be the entity or the person as part of the entity that will be held responsible if information is entered incorrectly, if underpayments are made, and who will be accountable for any restitution or sanctions that result as part of this project. Again, these payrolls are not to be taken lightly. They're very serious because as they are required, the consequences can be great. Next slide. So here is a sample copy of a certified payroll as it should be completed correctly. I'm going to go through, I inadvertently omitted one particular slide that is going to speak to what I'm talking about now, but we're going to do our best to make sure that based on what you're looking at, that I can explain to you what you are seeing. Ms. Barnes, I might need your help. And yes, ma'am, I might need your help in just circling the little arrow over particular areas I'm talking about. So,
Okay.
thank you. So I'm going to just talk about this particular sample of a certified payroll form and what are some common areas. Now, I have reviewed certified payrolls for many years, and I can say I don't want to say never, but very rarely have I received a certified payroll that did not have an error or an omission to it. The slightest error and omission must be corrected. You know, I can't correct it, or any person or a reviewer can't correct it, because the documents that we have must match documents that you're going to be required to keep on site, just in case. And when these payrolls are either audited by the federal agency or the Department of Labor, whether it be the FAA, whatever federal agency decides to come and monitor or audit these payrolls, they must be the original and they must be without error. Now, depending on what they're monitoring for, they can monitor, you know, to make sure that the calculations are correct, that all of the pertinent information is there, to ensure that in comparison with the wage determination for that project, that workers were paid the same and accordingly. So a number of things they're going to be looking at, but we're going to talk about some of the most common errors that that are usually associated when companies and entities are completing these certified payrolls. Okay, so if you're a sub working with a prime and the prime say, hey, those payrolls were incorrect, you got to get these corrected. They're not being accepted, they're being rejected, they're being returned. Here are some of the most common reasons why. If you look at the area which says payroll number, well, the first thing, let's just go through the whole thing. Name of the contractor. You have to identify your full business name as it is registered as part of the project. You want to check whether you are the prime or the subcontractor. Yes. Next, you'll see payroll number, where they have number 2. In this area, the payroll that you are submitting has to be in sequential order, starting the very first date you started on a project. Now, your company may not enter the project at the very beginning or the start of the project. You may come in, or your particular work or your particular skill on the project may come in at week 20. The project's been going on for 20 weeks, but your payroll will reflect that this is your first week. And then you will list your payroll as number 1, not 20, because the project is in its 20th week. Next to it, you will talk about what week ending. What is the week ending? Now, this end date for this particular payroll should, and the subsequent dates that are right up under it, the end date should match the particular dates that are listed there. And the dates, which could either go Sunday to Saturday, Monday through Sunday, however your company's work week is in terms of how you document payroll, that is how it should be listed there. Thank you, Ms. Barner. Far left, where it lists the name and individual identification on the employee. Now, every company, every entity varies. Because the information that is listed on these payrolls can be sensitive, there is not necessarily a requirement to list a full name here. You could use first name, last initial, and then the last 4 of the socials. You could do that. However, if an entity requires or allows you to do first initial, last full name, they may also require you to submit a full listing of your employees to have on file to accompany the payrolls. So, you can decide. You can list full names, or you can list first initial, last name. If there are a number of employees, or if there's not a subsequent full employee listing that is attached or that is on file with the agency, then you want to go ahead and list the full name. Okay, so but it's important for you to list at least the minimum first, last name, last 4 digits of the social as an identifier of the actual employee. Next column, where you'll see work classification. What's very important about the work classification is that however you classify an employee, it must match the classification on the wage determination exactly. So it's not enough to just list an employee as a laborer, because the wage determination may have 10 different classifications of a laborer. They may have a general laborer, they may have a laborer, landscaper, they may have a laborer, whatever. So however it is listed on the wage determination, and I apologize, I will include or will provide for you later if you want a sample copy of a wage determination so that you can see how those classifications are listed. But however the employee is listed on this payroll, it should match the classification as it is named on the wage determination. Okay. You'll see immediately next to that, well, let me put this. If you're entering, you'll see here on this sample where they entered owner. You may have some employees that work in the capacity of the owner or the foreman or the supervisor. Now, those particular classifications are not listed on the wage determination as such. However, they will only need to be listed if they are performing 20% or more of the work, and you will list them according to the type of work that they do on a particular project. Another thing to keep in mind as it relates to how an employee is entered on a payroll, you may have an employee that is skilled in several areas. They may be skilled as a plumber, may be skilled as an electrician. Keep in mind, they must be listed on the payroll on a particular day as the work that they completed. So they may have worked on the job Monday and Tuesday as a carpenter. They may have worked Wednesday as a roofer, and they may have worked Thursday and Friday as a plumber. So you will list them 3 times on those various dates. Yes, ma'am. 3 times on those various dates in their very specific work classification with the appropriate wage assigned to them. Now, this is important. Now, you may go and work on a project for a very long time that may or may not have been monitored or audited in over a year. However, at any point that a site visit is done, what is going to be looked at is the fact that, you know, I've gone on sites and I've sat in my truck for an hour and I've watched a particular worker on a site, and I've watched him on that roof for 30 minutes. And when I've called them down to do an interview, I've asked them to identify themselves, check their identification, make sure that I've had payrolls that have been submitted on them. And I asked him, what does he do? And if he says he's a laborer, I'm going to be, you've been on that roof for 30 minutes. You are a roofer. And there is usually a huge difference between what a laborer makes and what a roofer makes on a project. So it's those sort of things that you want to ensure when you are completing these payrolls that they are accurate, because they will be spot checked in comparison with the payrolls and information that is gathered at the site visit. Okay. Let's see here. We talk about total hours, being sure. You'll see in one area where 3 hours is listed on top. You'll see the O and the S in the little small box next to work classification. O is where you submit overtime hours. S is where you would enter standard work hours. And a good example of that is over to right where your arrow is. Go to the right where it says total hours in section 5. You'll see in that area where they listed 3 hours overtime and 40 hours standard. That is, you wouldn't put 43 hours. You would separate the standard hours and the overtime hours there and do the calculations accordingly. You want to make sure that you're totaling out in the next section 7, the gross amount earned. You want to make sure that in the deductions areas that all deductions must be listed there. You can't just put a dollar value amount of a deduction over in the next section, deductions, section 8, the next set of rows to the, yeah. All of those is where deductions should be listed, should be spelled out. You can't just enter a dollar value amount and not identify what that amount was deducted from. Again, that is important because we would monitor for if the deductions were permissible. You want to carry out the total of the deductions and then ensure that the gross minus the deductions are identified as part of the net. So that is page 1 of form WH-347, which is a standard certified payroll in terms of how it should be completed with some explanation. Let's look at page 2 before we get into questions on that. Next. So this is the statement of compliance page. This is the page that identifies a person, in this case is Sam Harrison, who is identified as the payroll coordinator, who is the certifying official for all that information that was entered on the front. If an audit, happens and the federal agency decide that they don't want to speak with the agency, they want to go directly to the source, more than likely they're going to be speaking to that person. So you want to be ensuring that the person who keeps up with all of this important information as part of your company is someone that you entrust, to enter this information, who will keep up with all of the federal requirements and document the project accordingly. You'll see in the area where the dates are, those dates that are on this statement of compliance must match the dates that are on the front of the particular payroll. The next section there where you see deductions, all deductions that were extra outside of your basic taxes, any deductions there should be listed in that area there. Okay. Where you see the 2 small check boxes, the check boxes there, one of these check boxes must be checked These are statements of how fringe benefits are paid to the workers. They're either going to be paid as part of a regular plan. If you're a company that has, you know, standard payroll with standard payroll deductions, and your benefits like insurance and things like that are paid as part of the plan, you would check box A, because it will say where fringe benefits are paid to approved plans, funds, or programs. If they are not paid as part of a plan, and on the wage determination, categories of the wage and the benefit are listed in two categories. So you'll have a base rate pay, and then you'll have a rate of pay for benefits. If the employee is not paid as part of a plan, then the minimum rate of pay for an employee would be the base rate and the fringe added together. So you would check that box. That means that the fringe benefit is paid as in cash as part of the minimum rate. Any exceptions, any explanations listed in the next category, any remarks, and then at the bottom where you'll see name and title and signature. All statement of compliances must be signed as an original document. That could either be a stamped seal, you know, whatever, but dated, or an original signature. Now, there were some accommodations that were made during COVID where, because payrolls used to have to be submitted in its original form without error. So, but during COVID, when we weren't doing a lot of face-to-face and things like that, and didn't have access to mail, we implemented where, and some companies submit payrolls as part of a particular system. It's still, you can enter it, you can scan it in, but just make sure, you know, that it can be identified, either, you know, the ink in blue or something like that, that identifies it more specifically. But, and so that has become an acceptable part until we get, you know, additional guidance that changes that. But this particular, all of the information submitted on page 1 is invalid if this page 2 is not included. So you're going to see that if you're submitting it and you didn't get this, because some people are like, I'm not certifying that, any of that information. Well, somebody has to certify it, and it has to be submitted as part of the payroll. Are there any questions about that so far? Keep in mind, again, from your perspective, you will either be the prime that receives these documents on a weekly basis from every subcontractor that you have working under you, and that they are correct and the information is correct, or you will be working on the project as a sub that has to submit the same payrolls to the prime to be submitted on your behalf.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What if these are audited and you're the prime and some of them underneath you for your subs are wrong?
Yes, ma'am.
What happens?
So what should be happening is how I'm training you now is how you should be training your subs to complete these forms. Because once they are submitted to you, you as the prime are fully responsible for everything that's on there. If it is audited and it is determined because you didn't check the payroll that an underpayment occurred, you know, that an employee was paid less than what the federal wage says he should have been paid, they're going to go back and calculate every payroll that had that employee listed at that rate, and you're going to have to pay restitution. Sometimes if you're not checking this on a regular basis, very easily can they get out of control and out of hand. And you're going to end up having to pay a lot of money. Again, this is why projects have to be bonded, because you got to have some assurances and some protections for you in meeting this responsibility or being accountable at this level.
Yes. Can you give us a horror story that this has happened to?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Well, I can give you several. Again, as I've said, I have very rarely received payrolls that have not been that have been free of errors and omissions.
Wow.
But very easily, some of these large DBE projects funded in the multi of millions of dollars, and who can have at any particular time in excess of 20, 30, 40 subs on them at one time. And keep in mind, you're looking at the fact that these payrolls have to be submitted every week. And so sometimes the agency or even the prime, in getting this massive number or overwhelming number of payrolls, will overlook the checks and the balances, and they'll go week to week, and that couple of weeks turn into a month, and that month turn into a couple of months, and turn into a year. And of course, when it is spot checked or audited, at a more detailed level, and it is determined that one particular employee worked on the project, or it even could be determined at the site visit that an employee was working on the project, you're now in week 20 of the project, and it was determined that that employee was underpaid according to the wage determination. And so at that point, not to say that type of spot check will happen on every payroll, it should, but if it's just so happened for that one particular, they will go back and calculate the underpayment or the amount for the past 20 weeks on that one. And they may decide to do it that if the red flags or the errors and the deficiencies are so significant, they can determine that they will deep dive audit every payroll. Just depends, and those numbers add up. Keep in mind when the audits happen, if they missed it on the front end and they saw it on the tail end, that's why certain retainages are kept. If restitutions are owed and you can't track down the employee, he worked on the project for the first 10 weeks, and now you're in week 40, you can't find that employee and things like that, the restitution still is owed, and you'll have to hold what is owed to them in the retainage and create an account for them in case they come back, because again, these are federal dollars, and then the audit, depending on which federal agency conducted the audit, will require you to show that you caught the error and that you made efforts to make restitution.
We have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
It says, my company is on a biweekly payroll schedule. Must I change to weekly for certified payroll?
That is the requirement. However, if you are utilizing a payroll system to show the breakout of what the 2 week breaks out into weekly, that sometimes is sufficient. But yes, the federal law requires that they are paid weekly. That is why this information is shared at the bid area, because you have to take these things into consideration when you are planning. It may mean that, you may have to make additional provisions in terms of how you are, keeping up with your payroll documentation and making those adjustments that you got to take into account, because it may, whereas you may, handle this through, as a smaller firm through some QuickBook or some smaller accounting software, you may have to invest in something a little more detailed because you're handling payroll at a higher and more regulation scrutinized capacity. Any other questions about this sample? I'm always available when you get my contact information, to kind of answer these kind of questions. We do it on a regular basis. It can be quite overwhelming, but one of the things I always tell companies that are interested and interested in working on these projects like this that require this level of regulatory compliance, don't get intimidated by it. What you need to do is invest in the investment, which means you hire someone that this is all they do, that they learn this, that they attend these trainings, that they know the paperwork, they know the ins and outs, and that's all they do. That your sole job is to learn how to complete these forms line by line, section by section, so that when they are submitted without error. I have trained, or individuals have attended training sessions with me before in another capacity. Again, I'm just new in this capacity, and I haven't offered this level of training in this particular role, but I have before. But the guidance, I can help create some training and opportunities as part of outreach, because again, we want to make sure that you're not intimidated by the regulatory compliance piece. We want to make sure that you get it down pat, so that you, as our minority business owners, are removing, that we're helping you to remove the barriers from competing on these projects. You can best assure that some of the larger GCs, they have this system down pat. They have it in place. They have somebody that this is what they do. Because your paperwork, which leads into you documenting what you have expended on the project and getting reimbursed for that and things like that, that's where your money come from. If your money or your payments are being held up for minor errors and omissions on paperwork, that's red flag, which means you're not at capacity to handle these types of projects. And we've had millions of dollars held up for payroll. I can't stress it enough. It's very important, but don't be scared of it now. I'm just a big old bear, a little cuddly bear at times. Next slide. Let's see what's happening. So this is just basically a review of what I just talked about in detail. Once construction is on the way, prime contractor will complete these on a weekly basis. They will sign the statement of compliance. Prime general contractor will obtain weekly payrolls from all of your subcontractors. To ensure compliance, certified payrolls must be submitted promptly by the prime to the user agency. Payroll should be reviewed by the prime contractor to ensure that there are no discrepancies or underpayments. Remember that the prime contractor is responsible for the full compliance of all subcontractors on the project and will be held accountable for any wage restitutions that may be necessary. This includes restitutions for underpayments and potentially liquidated damages, which may be assessed for overtime violations. Okay, because keep in mind what you report on that payroll and sometimes what your employees say in the interview, they be two different things. You want to make sure that they understand what their role is. Like what, we do have some, some people would generally classify themselves in general classifications. You'll have a worker that say, oh, I'm just a laborer. But that's not really what you are. You want to make sure that your employees working on particular sites know and understand what they do and what they are called for what they do. Just in case we come out on site visits, that information which is reported on the payroll must match. Okay. Next slide, and we're wrapping up, guys, I promise you. Same thing. Contractor or subcontractor shall make records required available for inspection, copying, or transcription by authorized representative of the contracting agency or the Department of Labor or any federal agency that is conducting the audit. Okay. Again, the user agency, if they're requiring you to do it, they are usually standing in as the first line to any auditors. So if they're requiring it, you want to make sure that they have it on file, because that will minimize the need for the federal agency to come directly to you. But they will, in some instances, come directly to you. And the same information that you've submitted on the project, they're going to ask for it, because as we get into the last slide, you have to keep your records in working on a federally funded project for 3 to 5 years. after you completed it. Okay,
I'm sorry, how many years?
3 to 5
Three
years.
to five, okay.
Yes, ma'am. If the contractor or subcontractor fails to submit the required records to make them available, that agency, after written notice, may face suspension of payment, debarment, all sorts of things, if the violation is willful. We don't get into much of that. Usually, if there are some violations, again, it's not to catch you and it's not to just be about penalizing you. However, if after notification that, we're experiencing this difficulty with you, your submissions and things like that, and you just continue to ignore it, then we're getting into willful violations. And those consequences can result in, debarment, things like that, where there'll be formal recommendations that you not be allowed to work on federal projects because of your subpar, your willful subpar submission and documentation. Okay, next slide. On-site interviews, this is just a review of what I just said. The on-site interviews, that's a component where we come on site randomly, most times without notice, usually based off of who you may have turned in based on the, the work plan, who's on site. Usually these should happen at the beginning of the project, middle of the project, and prior to the end of the project. We'd like to get a good representation of the various skills in the trades that have worked on the project. So if it is a large project, we usually like to get a 20% sample of, these heavy skills or, particular skills on a project to get a good representation. So that's what we mean by be representative. It should tell a good picture of who all worked on the project. The interviews are done confidentially. So, you as the owner of the company, all you'll know is that the interview is happening. We don't want the owners to use the interview or the potential of what information could be communicated in the interview against the employee. You can't use it as punitive to say that if you tell them this, or if you say something against what I reported, they'll have consequences. We don't want that. That's that can hold a whole nother level of consequences for you as the owner. So you don't want to use the fact that employees will be required to participate in the interviews as punitive against them. The interviews usually happen on site at the work site. We'll usually take them away in a private area by themselves. We don't do group interviews, things like that. Again, they are random. The employees are usually selected at random. Basically, the interviews highlight any discrepancies between what they say and what you reported on the payroll. And then we also require that the company or the owners or supervisors make provisions for non-English speaking employees. They just because they don't speak English or have difficulty in communication, that does not dismiss them from being able or being required to participate in the interviews. The interviews are formally documented on one or two forms. That's either going to be the United States General Services Administration Standard Form 1445 or the HUD Form 11. Basically about it, keep in mind, interviews usually happen, they are a required component of compliance monitoring. However, usually if they're frequent, if they're very frequent and often, that's usually because, some red flags have determined, that the interviews are necessary, or it just could be a matter that it is such a large project and typically the federal agency that is responsible for the project requires that they be done more frequently, or that a full 20% overall sampling of the project be done. Next, I think we should be wrapping up. Oh, this is a sample copy of the actual interview form, just for your view to be able to go back. They are usually when an employee is selected, we document who they are by getting a copy of their identification. Whatever is observed and communicated verbally is written on this form, and it is signed off by the employee as well as the interviewer. And it is made part of a formal and official record as part of the project. Next page. So after this, you'll be required to keep the files for a minimum of 3 years, or your documentation for a minimum of 3 years. Best practice is 5 years. You want to have it there because at any point, even after the 5 years after the project, you may get a call and say this project was selected for audit. Pull your boxes, either bring them to the agency's office or be prepared for the agency to come to you. And then just keep them together. Not having the files or the files being destroyed does not release your accountability or your responsibility to documenting this project. So you always, whatever you turn in to the agency, you want to make sure that you're keeping sufficient copies of the files for yourself. I know you've seen a lot of the stories and things on the news when companies go in and, you know, even though the CEO is no longer a part of the company, they went and found him because he worked on or certified documents as part of a federal project. Okay. Next slide. And then, so we're at the end. This is it. So I know after all that talking about what's required when you are a DBE project and how you monitor for compliance and all of these responsibilities, it would be good to know what is the prize at the end? What types of opportunities are going to be available for you in positioning yourself to the next level to be able to be the DBE on a project? So we have some upcoming projects. I listed a couple of projects with the city of Atlanta that are upcoming. To the right, you'll see what the projects are and when, what fiscal year they are attached to, but know that these will be bidded or proposed for bid in the next year with the city of Atlanta. So I encourage you first, after today, take in all that we've talked about. Start doing the legwork and the work to certify your company. And if you're not going to move through the certification, make sure that you are researching and getting all of the questions answered in those areas where there will be blanks left on your application to know how to get that filled in and how to submit a winning certification application and things like that. So start doing the legwork. Do that now. Ask questions, attend TAs, request TAs, do that. Start your list of all of those potential areas of the process that's intimidating to you, that are challenging to you, that you're still not sure of. Do the follow-up work so that it doesn't stop right there. We want to encourage you to familiarize yourself with all of the guidelines, the certification guidelines and requirements that Megan discussed with you earlier, as far as the city's local diversity goal participation programs, as well as those at federal levels with DOT, Department of Aviation, things like that. And then we encourage you to continue to log into the city's Department of Procurement website and a new site that the city launched called atlsuppliers.com. That's a website that will, it increases accessibility for existing companies, but it is all a one-stop shop for listings and opportunities and communication centered around what's coming up. in one area. So familiar yourself with visiting, familiar yourself with those sites, and go on frequently, particularly leading up to the projects that are listed there, so that you'll have opportunity. Those are some with the city, but I also received from a colleague today that there are some upcoming projects that he knows of through MARTA that are upcoming. I think there's going to be some, they're going to be adding a couple of new bus stop shelters. I'm thinking some sidewalks, some curbing projects. They're going to be expanding some particular rail lines, I think from North Springs. They're going to be doing some remodeling at the Inman Park station, Reynoldstown station, maybe some renovations or expansions on the Westlake Blue Line. I may not have all these correct. I'm just throwing them out there. I'm only going to talk about specifically with the city, but just wanted to mention to you some of those other projects that were mentioned to me today. Just know that there's plenty of opportunities upcoming, and you won't know if you qualify for them if you don't try. So do your best efforts. I hope the information that we provided for you today was helpful. If not, we're always available to continue to answer questions that you may have. You can feel free through our contact information to email us. That's usually the best way, to email us your very specific questions so that you can have a documented answer to it, and you'll be able to utilize that for future reference. Thank you guys for your time this evening, okay? Any questions?
Thank you. Very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, you had a question?
No, I was just saying goodbye, that's all.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Don't leave yet, because we got the homework assignment.
Beth. Yeah, Beth, I wanted to find out if we could get Ms. Sean's contact information.
It's on the slide after the
Oh,
homework assignment.
okay.
She
Thank
got
you.
you.
Yes. All right.
Okay. The homework assignment is here. Write it down. I will also email it to you, but sometimes it'll take me a little while. Number one, what are the laws, provisions that regulate Davis-Bacon labor standards? Number two, what certifies a payroll? Number three, what are the four main purposes of a statement of compliance? Number four, name two documents that are used to compare accuracy of information submitted on certified payrolls. You guys write this down.
I got one more form.
Oh, got another question.
I got
Write
one
that
more.
down.
I got one more, because listen, I'm telling you, you're going to need to know this. So I referenced 3 or more clauses that were included in this PowerPoint or this webinar per federal laws and provisions that must be included as part of all contract or subcontract agreements. What were 3? Name 3.
3 clauses?
Three clauses.
Or laws, clauses.
Like what 3 clauses were referenced that must be included in contract or subcontract agreements?
Mm-hmm. You guys have written that down before I move away? Okay. Miss Latasha? Miss,
Beth, are you gonna email that to us? I'm driving. This is TJ.
I'm gonna email it to you, but
Okay.
she has to email me that fifth
Fifth
question.
one. Mhm.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. I got it. Miss
Now,
Beth.
here is the contact information on the screen. Write it down. Take a picture of it with the phone. Young people tell us, just take a picture.
Picture of it.
That's how you learn. Take a picture of you. Oh, all that.
Miss Beth, will this recording be available anywhere?
Eventually, yeah, you guys, I'll have all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
And all presentations will be placed in a binder that we give it to you for the at your certificate program. The presentation for every module will be in a binder.
Will we
Give you
be
the-
able to download the videos for all the?
I will give you the links.
Perfect.
And this is the information. Miss Dismuke, Shona, Miss Megan Payne. Okay, let's see. 808, huh? What's the next slide? Our next session will be November the 10th. Mr. Hebrew Dixon will speak on project management claims and disputes. At that time, you're supposed to submit to me the homework from this class. And when I email you the homework assignment also, last time I was supposed to be sending it to you, the survey, I will email you the survey for last class and this class, the links to go ahead and complete them, all right? Are you guys here with me still?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we're here.
That's it. Thank you for joining us. Any questions before we say good night? A whole bunch of
We don't have a
information,
reading.
very good information.
Very
That's
good.
it. Okay,
Have a good night. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
bye-bye.
Okay.
Good night.